we want to make sure before we get started to tell you a little bit about ourselves so you know who you're talking to. So Adriana, if I can switch to that, tell us a little about yourself.
Absolutely. So my name is Adriana Schneider. I'm a senior engagement engineer with Imagine It. Basically, I started out as an architectural engineer, worked in industry for a long time, moved over and worked at Autodesk when Revit MEP and Revit Structure first came out, and then moved over to the channel, training, support, all of that good stuff. And about 8 years ago, I moved over to this role, which really helps clients create strategic plans for their implementations. We want to make sure that you are adopting the technology that you've already invested in. So we help with that.
Yep. So Adriana and I are on the same team. I'm an engagement engineer. You'll notice if you were paying attention, she is a senior engagement engineer, which I think means she's older than me or something like that. But what it comes down to is I do the same thing that she does, the idea of talking to clients, figuring out strategic plans, what makes sense with software going forward, how that fits together. Now, I'm new to this team. I've been in several different roles with Imagine It. I've been around about 20 years. Some of you probably have heard a couple of my webcasts through the years. I've done a lot of them. But in this role, I'm able to leverage a lot of that different things I've done in people management, in the training side, and the implementation side to look at these big strategic goals and strategic ideas kind of moving forward with that. Now, I said I've been around about 20 years, and a lot of things have changed in that time. The idea of moving from 2D to 3D, even before that, line drafting with pencils, moving over to CAD. Then moving into data management. And as each one of those has come along, one thing that's kind of been bubbling up as part of this is the idea of using Revit and Inventor. Now, before this, it wasn't Revit and Inventor. We had AutoCAD files and we sent them all around. And then as the tools became specialized, it became a little more difficult to share that. So that kind of what brings us to today. So Adriana insisted that we include this picture as part of it and talk about how these workflows kind of come together. So from a manufacturing side, that's what I've seen. Adriana, can you talk a little bit about what you've seen on your side of things?
Yeah, so there are a lot of manufacturers that are using Inventor, from a Revit perspective, as Revit has evolved, as Inventor has evolved, continues to become easier to be able to bring in that type of content. Although initially, we're asking manufacturers to create content specifically for Revit. That was kind of tough. Manufacturers need they have different goals than the architects, right? So there's a lot more detail in their content that architects don't need. So I'm really excited at, how much investment Autodesk has done with this integration, because I think that it's going to make it a lot easier and really streamline that workflow between the two.
Yeah, and there's a lot of tools that help streamline that workflow, so that we can get to where we're all holding hands on that. And one of them is this idea of being able to leverage the data management tools that we have for each one of those. So coming from the manufacturing side, working with Inventor, if I hear data management, if I hear file management, I'm thinking Vault. And that's part of where the files that I'm going to have are going to be working. But one thing that we'll be talking about and kind of discussing as we go through this workflow is being able to link Vault up to BIM360. So Vault on the manufacturing side is a file and data management system. It allows me to understand the relationship between my files, easily create copies. It's where I live most of the time. It's where my files live. It's where I go to retrieve them. However, it's a little different when we're looking at the architectural side. So Adriana, can you kind of BIM360 give us kind of a big, broad overview of that, and we can talk a little bit of how those tie together.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this integration. We've been waiting a long time for it, right? Because on the manufacturing side, you guys use Vault a lot, all day long, and from an architectural perspective, we really didn't have a place where we could store our files that was really Autodesk related, right? We had Dropbox and those types of tools. But now we have this Autodesk related location where we can store files, we can collaborate with our team members. So BIM360 Document Management is basically that storage solution, that base platform. And then we have additional modules to allow us to collaborate during design, during the construction side of things, and very easily be able to access our files anywhere that we are. So it started out with Revit Server. It was all about augmenting the speed in which we save and store our files, moved over to collaboration for Revit, but they really nailed it on the nailed it when they brought on BIM 360. And I'm really excited that this integration across the board over to Vault, while utilizing some of those additional, you know, APIs, the Forge platform and things like that, to be able to really streamline that integration.
Yeah, so we're not going to get too deep into the how of that, but that's the idea behind it, is we're linking some of this together. Now, another tool that I'll be leveraging, and it's just a feature, I don't know if I should even say a tool, it's a feature that's just within the Autodesk platform, it's within Inventor, is this idea of AnyCAD. And if you, some people, you might have heard of AnyCAD with the idea of bringing in, you know, maybe a SolidWorks file, a Dassault product, or bringing in some Creo or NX, and we can link it in and not change the original format. So it's not an import, it's linking. Interestingly enough, up to 2021, one of the pieces that was missing was linking to Revit. So we couldn't even bring in other Autodesk products. We could bring in all these competing ones, but not Autodesk. So with 2021, we have the idea of linking Revit files in. And this is, I can work with them, and that's part of what we're going to show, is how we're going to leverage this, bring this in, and begin working with this a little bit. So that's going to be a key piece for me. So we're talking about a lot of different tools here, and I wanted to make sure that we had a kind of, oh, I'm going to step back. I'm getting too far ahead of myself. So what we want to do is we want to walk through kind of how this would work a little bit, and it tends to work, you know, in a lot of places that I've seen and how things go. So I'm actually going to stop my webcam because we're going to get into some of these different pieces, and I don't want to distract myself as I go here. But here's what I'm going to do. This is be really common. The role I'm going to play as a manufacturer, and I come in and check my mail, and Adriana has sent me this. She says, hey, good morning, Caleb. I've got a cabinet, needs to be customized for a project. Let me know if Caleb Designs can give me a few options. You can find a partial 3D of the office here. So I'm going to stop there for a moment, and now I'm going to share my desktop, bring up and take a look at this file. So this is really common, right? The way that this workflow would typically go is it starts out in email, something goes along. What I would expect would be a PDF file, and that's probably the most usual way that these things get shared. But I'm going to drop out of this a second, and I'm going to pull up that link that she sent me. And yep, I'm still sharing my screen. I just want to make sure. I'm going to pull up the link that she sent me. And this is Autodesk Viewer. So she created a shared view within Revit, and now I'm in here taking a look at the Autodesk Viewer. Now, in the email, she mentioned the outlined in red cabinet, and if I take a look, I'm not seeing an outlined in red cabinet, but if I go over here to my comments, I have a comment that she's created on here with, sure enough, an outlined in red cabinet. So this is what I want to focus on. This is the area that I'm going to kind of take a look at. And as a quick pass, as a, hey, we want to start examining this a little bit, and do you think you could build this, and this is what I want to show you. This is a pretty slick way to do that. Now, when she exported this, she also gave me the ability to come in and grab some dimensions off of here. So it is possible that I have enough information here to begin giving a quote for something like this, right? I mean, but if I take a look at this, I might want to be a little more precise. Instead of looking at this as, you notice all these are approximate values, and I'm clicking close, and I might be off. So I'm getting close. I get a sense of this. This is good. If I wanted to, I could go ahead and comment back, and I could pass that information on. But instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come along, and I'm going to say, you know what? That sounds great. I can get dimensions off that link, but could you email me the Revit model? And again, this is where email is such a typical thing that happens to us, and it's something we tend to live in. And I'm going to jump right down to that D45. You know, I can import it, I can pull what I want off. But Adriana knows all about BIM 360 and all those things, so she says, you know what? I'm going to give you access to that BIM 360 site. You're good. You know, let me know if you have trouble. Here you go. So now I, as the manufacturer, can leverage BIM 360. I can link to it with my Vault. And again, broad strokes, we can get back into it later, but we can link into it and begin to pull that out. So this idea, this workflow that we have here, where we want to kind of start, this is what we're going to be working with and a little bit of how this is going to go. So Adriana, I'll have you talk through the idea of the architect, what you would do, how that would link to BIM 360, and I'll talk about pulling it into my side.
Yeah. So, we're currently in design. So I'm actually, for those of you that are familiar with BIM 360, I'm utilizing BIM 360 design. I'm able to publish my project file over to the document management side of things and share that with Caleb. Actually give him access to that BIM 360 file so that he can go ahead and download it. It's that straightforward right now.
Yeah, so that's where we're at. So it gets pushed up there. That's part of it. Now, I could download it from BIM 360, but part of the idea behind this is I can sync to my vault to that. That pulls it in, so it's in my vaulted environment. I don't have to do anything. I don't do any downloading. Vault handles that back and forth. If Adriana makes a change, I'm going to see it on my end. That it's going to redo that link and pull it in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take that file, import it with AnyCAD. So I now have an Inventor model that I can work with, create some custom geometry off of that, take a Revit family, build a Revit family out of that, check that into Vault. That's going to then sync with 360 back to her, at which point she can pick it up and pull it into Revit. All right, so this is a very broad strokes version of this as we were talking through. Obviously, there's a lot of moving pieces, a lot of different setups, some different components, but the idea of it is here. And this is, it was interesting when Adriana and I were putting this together. She goes, I don't want to put an end because there's so much more to this. So we decided to be continued. Made a lot of sense as this would go. So at this point, on both sides, you're going to be doing more with your Inventor model, and I'll be doing more on the Revit side of things. We can look at presentations and materials and all that. So, there's so much more to it, and we will continue to integrate and between our two firms, if you will, between those two different softwares, as well as additional softwares, not only by Autodesk, but potentially some supplemental ones as well. Awesome. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and if I can find the thing I'm looking for. Suddenly I can't remember where I put this piece. So give me just a second here and I'm going to grab the piece. So what I'm going to do is I want to load in I want to go grab the file that she sent me, and I'm going to pull that in so that we can have that within here. Awesome. So I'm going to show my screen and make sure where I'm at. So Adriana, can you see my screen okay? Is it coming through?
I can, yes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Okay. So here's the Revit file, right? We've had the idea of BIM 360. It's been uploaded. I get it through my vault, and I say, okay, I want to go ahead and use that. And this is kind of where I want to start with this idea of bringing this information in and working with this. This is using AnyCAD. This is using that idea within AnyCAD that I have. And as we go through, you notice I can reference the model or convert the model. And what I want to do is I want to reference that. By referencing it, I'm maintaining a link to it. And this is true of AnyCAD across the board. Reference is how we invoke AnyCAD. It's not a button I can hit. It's not something I turn on. It's just by referencing it, I get to use that feature. And then as I go through and take a look at these different views that I have in here, Adriana was kind enough to give me one of these. So I've got a simplified version of that. So it tells me you've got 39 elements in here. You can load that in. As a manufacturer, I am most likely concerned with one area of this building, one component. Now, interestingly enough, some of our colleagues are doing a larger system-wide integration, talking about Revit and Inventor. This is more of a point product type of thing. So I don't, there's a whole dental office. I do not care what door she's using. I do not care about any of that. What I'm looking at is just this idea. So she was kind enough to give me just that view. That's a view generated in Revit. I can get right down to that view, and I'm going to bring it in. Now, one thing that always surprises me about the way that the AnyCAD and Inventor work is how quickly it imports this information. It's a lot of info, and it brings it in right away. And I'm just going to kind of drill down here a little bit. This, like I said, I've been doing this for years, and it still impresses me. I enjoy it so much when I see things like this. It's bringing in each of these different areas. And Adriana, I'm not that familiar with Revit. And in Revit, do these show up as different folders within Revit as well?
So it's not really how it works in Revit, but each one of those
Gotcha.
is its own individual component, its own content, yes.
Yep. So I can drill down to the individual content, the individual pieces that I have in here. And all I'm really concerned with is one piece, right? So I'm just going to real quick say, you know what, I just want to go get this one part. And I'm just going to kind of cheat a little bit basically and say, yeah, get rid of the rest. That's all I'm concerned with is I just want to look at this one component that I have in here. So I could use the tree, turn them on, turn them off, and view that. And I think it's interesting that Revit doesn't have those folders and that this is somehow magically working within Inventor. I applaud Autodesk on that. I think that's a great way to access that information. Now that I have the content, what can I do with it? And that becomes one of the kind of beginning questions of, how do I even, it's here. It's one kind of chunk, I guess, from Revit. In Revit, this would be a Revit family. So it's a piece I have in here. Well, I do have all of the simpler things I can do where I can come along and, measure pieces off of it so I could get those precise measurements. I could at this point create a drawing from this and pull measurements off of it that way. One thing I think is kind of neat, though, is that I can use this if I want to begin doing a layout of this, if I want to borrow geometry off of it, whatever it's going to be, I can do that fairly easily. So if I come along over here and I'm going to say I want to create, and I'm going to create a counter. Oh, helps if I spell it right. So I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and create a countertop out of this. I can work right in position here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Create a sketch on it. And now it's going to act like any Inventor part that I've brought in. So this is, at this point, this is completely as if I'm working right within Inventor with any other component that I have. I can now project the geometry off of that. Let's see if I can grab that whole thing at once. I can project the geometry and begin building components. In this case, I'll take that and I'll extrude it. And I can even do things like, well, I'm going to go to, and I'm going to grab that underlying layer there. So now, on top of what I have, I can start building the different components so that I could send them off to my nesting, so I can manufacture them. I can work right down the line and do that. So let's build its own separate piece. Completely leveraging the Revit geometry that I have. Now, I'll get a little deep in the weeds. You might have noticed that geometry when I went ahead and borrowed it, it was yellow. It wasn't standard, so it was linked to that component. If her underlying Revit geometry changed, I could update it and watch the change in here. Now, I'll throw a couple other quick things out at you when it comes to looking at this and working with this. In this case, I built this part right on top of what I had there. Realistically, if I'm going to work with this in any kind of fashion, I'm going to want each of these pieces to be a separate component within here and be able to come in and have all of these little separate pieces so that I can begin constructing off of that. And I'll step back just for a moment and give you an idea what I did. And if I can find my skeleton. Here's what I did. I took that basic cabinet that was there and I created a whole bunch of surfaces off of it to kind of use as a master model. Once I had those, I could then take it in here, begin then pulling pieces off of it, and now I'm kind of finishing it out, right? I've got my toe kick that I'm putting in some different cleats that I'll have as part of this. I have my nail backers, I'll be putting in my doors, my different pieces. So this is what I would need to begin manufacturing this. I've got it all laid out. I've got my pieces. I've got my bill of material information that I can pull off of it. And all of that came directly off that Revit model. In my case, I started out, again, just borrowing those basic sketches there so that I could then create the rest of the information. However, what I want now, once I've gone through and created all of my custom information, send it out to nesting, send it out to Woodwop or whatever I'm sending it out to so I can begin generating my code and cutting these up and assembling them, that's Adriana doesn't care. What her concern on her end is she wants that information placed back into her model, right? She's like, this is a custom one I'm creating. She had a placeholder. I've now gone through and I'm building it up, and I want to send this back to her. So there's two sides to this. One, I'm able to leverage the existing Revit information to build my stuff. But two, I want her using my models. It's a great way to begin building that relationship. Like, yeah, absolutely. Let me get you that model. And again, I'm just going to leverage what exists today within the Inventor tool. This has been around for a while. It's a series of things that I can access, and I can send this across. So in my case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, let's take a look at the environments, and I do have a BIM Content Environment. And this has been around for a little bit. If you've ever clicked on it, even accidentally, you come in and you're like, what? Duct connectors, pipe, electrical, I don't know what this is. Most of this, unless you're specifically building something that interfaces, and I mentioned our colleagues are doing kind of more of a system thing. They're going to have devices that go in that link into building systems. That becomes useful then, but in my case, I don't care. This is going to sit up against the wall. It doesn't have to have duct connectors. It doesn't have to have conduit connectors. What I am going to do is I'm going to position, actually I'll position in a second. I'm going to author this as a building component. So I'm going to say, all right, we're going to go ahead and set this up. And then this pulls up and gives me a couple of different things here. So when I take a look at this, I get to come along and give it a 0, point. And this to me is key. If I give you one tip today when you're creating information that's going to end up in Revit, is Revit has a different XYZ. Sometimes the Z is always up. A lot of times when we're working, the Z is out toward us. And I say we, listen to me. When manufacturers are working, when Inventor guys are working, the Z comes out toward us, right? So a lot of times I have to reposition that. And I can do it with the UCS. I can do it with what I have here. The other key thing that I can do is I can now come along, and this is this Omni class. I vaguely know what it is. This is a way of understanding how. Is this keynotes? What does this end up being, Adriana, on the other side?
No, that's the Omni class number.
Okay, and what is the Omni class to you? Like for me, I'm picking it from the list, which is great. But what's the Omni class on your end? Does it go into?
It could be incorporated. It could be incorporated into specifications if necessary.
There we go. Okay, so this is basically the spec that I'm giving it, and I'm defining that the spec that I have is going to be a dental casework. So part of the dental casework spec, I've got my dimensions that I can plug in. I've got my description information, finishes that I want to put on it, simple things like that. I've got some of this information in place, and now all I really need to do is export it. So author just sets up all this information. That's what I'm doing. I'm defining it, and then I can come along and then I can export it. So what export allows me to do is take this information. I've done it once. Give it my code here, 210226. I can then take that information, and when I save it, it saves it as a Revit family. So a Revit family, and I'll have Adriana explain a little more in a little bit, is how stuff gets put into Revit, right? So this isn't, there's the idea of saving it as a Revit file. I effectively am, but it's a very specific one. So I'm going to go ahead and save this out. And away it goes, and it goes through and does whatever magic it needs to in the background to create this Revit family. But it takes my Inventor information and puts it into a format that can easily be brought into Revit and understood and worked with within Revit. So I'll let that run just for a second here. I am going to grab my vault, because ultimately I'm going to take this file and I'm going to place it over in my vault. I can see, yep, that sounds good. So just click, it says, hey, look, this was fine. Do you want to take a look at your translation report? And I'll say, sure, let's go ahead and take a look at it. So this just describes what I did, the information that went out. Are there any parameters that went along with it? Very, it's the basic information. It's anytime, if you've ever translated anything with Inventor, here, it's the same translation report we would always see. So I'm over here, I'll log into my vault. and I want to check this information into my vault. Now, since it's a Revit family, I don't have a direct integration. I can't do it from my browser, right? I can check this file in. Where's my vault content? Let's finish my BIM content there. There we go. So I can go ahead and check this file in, but it's not going to check in the components that go along with it. I need to log into my vault here real quick. So yep, sounds good. So I'll just do that separately. And the reason that I'm checking it into my vault, I'm not even really going to manage it, but since I have it linked to the, save it, check it in, please. So there we go. Since I have it linked to the BIM 360, I'll check it into Vault, and that's where the handoff is. I can then, shoot off an email, say, hey, I checked it in, and check your BIM 360 site. It's going to be there. I don't have to pack it up. I don't have to email it. It'll just be available as part of that. So while I have that folder over here for that, let's refresh that dental casework folder is over here. The dental millwork, I'm sorry. I've only got the skeleton as part of that. I'm going to go ahead and add in that file and just drop that RFA in there for her. So we'll grab it. Sounds good. There's the RFA. Gets added in. And it's going to tell me it can't do it because of its because it wants to do it thinks it's linking in a Revit file. So that's fine. I'm going to cheat for a minute here. And then I'll check that in. So I'll add that file in. Sounds good. So once I add that in, I'll let BIM 360 kind of pick it up from there. BIM 360 can take it. There's a link to that, and that's something that we can set up. It's one of our administration options where we can go through and set up the collaboration link where we've got cloud drive mapping. Again, I'm not going to get too deep into this. This is a whole thing where we can go through and take a look at how we can link cloud drives to that, configure the settings and when it's going to do it and all of that. The idea is I'm done. I've gone through, imported the model, pulled the information off of it. Now that I've got the information off of it, it's uploading, going up to the cloud, and I will pass this now over to the other side. So Adriana, you are the presenter.
Great, thank you so much. So this is my BIM 360 site. I am utilizing both document management as well as design collaboration because I've been working on this project for months, with my engineers and things like that. I was able to share my file with Caleb by simply publishing out, updating it to the latest. That actually will send it back to the document management. And in my folder structure, I have different folders, one for the design model, which is this one right here, and then one for the actual millwork families. So whatever was brought in, there's the Caleb Designs cabinet that he has created for me. It's now located within my BIM 360 folder. So absolutely excellent, loving it. So now that everything's updated, I can go back into Revit. I can simply load the family and bring that in and position it where it needs to be. So casework, and this is another piece of this too, right? So if I'm going to open it up first and then we'll take a look at it. I'm just going to drop it in here. So the family itself, basic functionality, basic components, parameters of a Revit family, the dimensional information, finish, model number, manufacturer. Here's the Omni class number and the Omni class title, right? And so this is kind of that initial stage where, okay, I just need to make sure that the dimensions are correct. I'm going to go ahead and move it over in front of the wall here. I want to make sure that within my 3D view, I'm looking at both of these. Yep, they're pretty standard, straightforward, and there we go. Now, one of the things that in the past has concerned me about the integration between Inventor and Revit is the fact that this is not a parametric object. But let's talk a little bit about the workflow of an architect, the workflow of how we really want to add components, right? We want to be able to, especially early on schematic design, we want to know that we have a simple piece of geometry. One thing that I always want to make sure once I get the content back from Caleb or any of my manufacturers is the size, right? We want to make sure it's small, it's petite, not too clunky. This is absolutely fine. But initially, I just needed to stick something in there. It's going to look kind of like that. Then I can go ahead and once it's time to actually do my specifications or my FF&E or any of those things, I have the ability to work with my manufacturer to get the specific materials that I want, the hardware that I want, and all of that data and information, which again, like I said, this is the beginning parts and pieces to it, right? We can add additional parameters that can then be populated from the Inventor model, data and information that we can bring in ourselves as well, right? Utilizing some of our, well, just plug in, imagine it, our Revit utilities that allow us, the family parameter manager that allows us to add bulk family parameters into Revit family. So it's quick and easy to be able to do that. So our schedules will populate the way that we need them to. So the whole concept of having a parametric family, once we've established the specifications that we need from our manufacturer, it no longer needs to be parametric, right? It can be a stagnant family because it's exactly what it is that I want and what it is that I need. Now, in a schematic design phase, I want to be able to change the size, the materials. That's when we're going to be doing those things. But once we start getting into the finality of our construction documents, we don't need to have that parametric tool, or the parametric change engine. That's something that for a long time bothered me about that integration between Inventor and Revit. But just like Revit, and what I constantly say all the time about Revit is it is a workflow change. It's not the way we used to do it, the way we used to work within an AutoCAD environment. We have to change our processes and our ways to be able to work the way is best with Revit. So I now have the project continues to be in BIM360. I have my family that I got from the manufacturer that he was able to link from his environment to BIM360. And now we can start moving forward, maybe start taking a look at things like differences in materials, maybe some renderings and things like that. I have a very small piece in this one.
Yeah, no worries. And that's part of the reason we looked at like what's to be continued, right? Because there's a lot that more that could be done, a lot more that could be put out there. But I'm a big fan of looking at a workflow in a simple way, like how do we get it from A to B? And this is exactly what we're looking for. Adriana, could you pass it back to me? I just want to pull this up here so we can.
Sharing. Hold on. Oh, sorry. Just give me 2 seconds. There we go.
Awesome. Now I got to figure out, show my screen. So I just wanted to pull this one back up. Oh, go back one. I just want to pull this one back up. This is what we were just talking about, right? You know, this is, because when we first put this together, when we first saw it, like, my gosh, it's a lot of steps that we're looking at and all those different pieces. But here we were able to run through that in something like 30 minutes, you know, as a simple version of it. You know, importing the information, creating some geometry. This flow from one to the other is pretty key for how we can begin leveraging that back and forth. So for this one, the idea would be, I'm a manufacturer that creates a particular product, and I want to push that product so that we can, you know, so that an architect can leverage it in their design. To Adriana's point, the idea of having we've got a product line that can, a Revit family that's parametric. We want to be able to switch it up so it's several different sizes. Right now, that is one limitation of Inventor. I can't send out a Revit family that's 5 different sizes. I would have to have 5 different Revit families. If that's really the key, you know, I've got casework that comes in 10 different sizes, and I want to give Adriana a family that has 10 different sizes in it, I would probably leverage Revit to build that. I might start with some Inventor models, bringing them in, but then ultimately it would probably be built within Revit. That's what we've seen up to this point. I have a few manufacturers I work with who have a seat of Revit over in the corner so they can do that, or they leverage it someone outside. They say, hey, here's some models, build these for us, and we'll put them up to our website so they can be downloaded.
And if I can interrupt for 1 second, that's what I think is so exciting about our webinar series that we're putting together. This is the first one, right? Just like in other design tools, you know, there are different ways of being able to utilize Revit, utilize Inventor. This is just one way, right? There's no necessarily 100% right or wrong way. It's all about the workflow and your environment and how you need to use things. So with this one, we're specifically focusing on, I've already designed everything. I have my, you know, placeholder. I know the size, the dimensions. I know kind of some of the things that I want to use, but now I want to rely on my manufacturer to give me that final product. That's just, again, one way of being able to handle that because of the specific workflow that we have within this particular design project. It's not going to be for everyone every single time, but that's why we have different workflows and different ways of utilizing the two tools together.
Absolutely. So that's the big broad picture that we wanted to show you. And what we want to do though, a lot of times when I find this, when I say, hey, you can do this thing, man, it generates, you know, you now have more questions than you do answers. So we do want to open it up to Q&A, but we've got a couple questions for you. We keep talking about this idea, we could do this, we could do that. What do you want to see next? You know, the idea of leveraging some information to build multiple Revit families, adding materials, you know, there's a lot of different ways we can go. And of course, we have some ideas, but it'd be great to hear that. And we're both super curious. Do you see value in this workflow? Is this something that you would hope to work with?